statutory expenditures shown under section 4.5 of these estimates, where a number of agencies whose monies can't be changed after they've been approved are listed. And you can do the same with the constitutional agencies. So, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, these are the main points I would like to make in relation to the bill. It is it's quite a straightforward bill. Take off the schedule those agencies that should not be there, not because we don't like them up there, but because the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, requires that they be treated as financially independent. The supreme law of the land cannot be subsidiary to the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, especially when the Act includes a number of agencies that conveniently fall under the aegis of control of the Ministry of Finance under the Office of the President, which is an even more important. So, in the light of these points, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, I would like to commend to you the proposed bill and to urge that you lend it your support, since it is worthy. May I make one point before closing? It is to pick up an observation made, I think, by the Honorable Minister of Finance when we were trying to block the consideration of this particular bill. The first item that is listed in the draft is the Judicial Service Commission. And the Service Commission actually does not appear on the schedule. So that we can amend. I don't think it's a big issue. But all the others appear on the schedule of the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. I thank you very much for your patience.
Members, I invite the representative from the Alliance of Change to address us if they so desire.
More or less parliamentary secretary.
They have just one speaker that they've chosen when to bring that speaker on.
Well, in that case,
That's your
sorry, I
prerogative.
utilize any opportunity to support Mr. Greenwich and his members' bill. There are some aberrations, as you mentioned, and it is in view of the fact that we need to straighten these matters out, making what ought to be independent entities and also making those institutions which ought to be financially independent going in accordance with Article 222A. And though we may only see Article 222A a short list of those entities, it does necessarily follow by virtue of what Article 222 and the other financial provisions of the Constitution have been dictating. These will not be budget agencies, but rather independent entities. I concur with the arguments as presented by Mr. Greenwich, and the Alliance of Change support the passing of this bill.
Mr. William.
I rest to support the amendments to the schedule in the Financial Management and Accountability Act bill, as laid by the Honorable Member Greenwich. Section 82 makes provision for amending the schedule, and if one was to have a course to the definition section of the Act, Section 2, we see it defines budget agency. And this really is a crux of the matter. Head of budget agencies also defined, and the schedule of budget agencies. And it is important to recognize that budget agency important definition is head of budget agency. Which includes means of permanent secretary, acting permanent secretary, or other officials as may be designated by the finance secretary or so into another section of the act. So what this means, Mr. Speaker, if you were to look merely at this act, one wouldn't get a real appreciation as to remedy the mischief that we are seeking to remedy in this proposed bill. So we must start with the Constitution, the National Constitution, which will explain why we have come to this proposed amendment. Before 2001, the Constitution itself expressly delineated commissions and other institutions that were supposed to be independent. There wasn't any schedule. And basically, they were independent. The common thread for independence was that they were not accountable to anyone. For example, in the execution of their duties, and also that they were entitled to lump sum payments. In fact, in relation to service commissions, Article 226 clearly speaks to their independence. 226.1, save as is otherwise provided in this Constitution, in the exercise of its functions under this Constitution, a commission shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person. Very clear. And 226.7 defines what is meant by the expression commission, and this is said to include elections commission, judicial service commission, public service commission, teacher service commission, or the police service commission. So before 2001, when our existence, the Constitution was very clear about what institutions were to be independent. You had the Public Service Appellate Tribunal, 215A, speaks to the independence of that body, along with the Auditor General. The Honorable spoke about the correcting of the situation with the Auditor General. And so there were no difficulties in that regard. Suddenly, in 2001, Article 222A came into being and purported to create a schedule, which is the third schedule, to list the independent entities. And that's where the whole problem was created. Because it omitted, very short, it omitted independent bodies and institutions. And we wondered why they did that. But this was 2001 of these institutions. And what happened, Mr. Speaker? The Honorable Speaker is agitated. The Honorable Attorney General is agitated. And is anticipating what happened was that in that act, they purported to create another schedule. And they purported to create schedules and institutions called budget agencies, headed by permanent secretaries. What this meant was that the head of these budget agencies had control of any institution listed in the schedule to the fiscal magic benefit of the In other words, when you look at the act, all the traditional independent entities are listed here. All without fail, left or equals. So it meant that what was being essayed by the part of the government was an intention to control everything. in this country, by the means of the old well-worn aphorism says, who paid the piper caused the tune. So Mr. Speaker, what it meant was this. What it meant, Mr. Speaker, was this. Why, Mr. Summerland? Why, Mr. Summerland, Mr. Speaker? So let's take Chico first. Remember Article 226 said that it's independent. When it was made a budget agency, what happened was that the head of the presidential secretariat became the head of the budget agency. In other words, Office of the President was now in control of the finances of GCOM. And what happened? But I don't know if the head of the president, Dr. Roger Luncheon, was working at finance. I don't know if Mr. Dr. Luncheon at the time.
As a matter of factual correction.
No, you have to say what you got.
As a matter of factual correction, that is what I'm getting up to.
No, you can't. I don't understand that.
Mr. Speaker, just to correct Mr. Williams, the head of the presidential secretary, you're still wounded from that. You're still wounded from that occasion. Mr. Speaker, as a point of clarification, the head of the presidential secretary was never designated the head of any budget agency.
No, I am saying, Mr. Speaker, from personal experience, with dealing with the matter, that on line items for the expenditure on items to GCOM had to be given by Dr. Roger. I say that. Elections, remember this act was 2003. It meant in the run-up, the office to the president, through that budget agency arrangement, exercise control over the business by means of whether they're going to release money to certain expenditure or not. That's exactly what happened. I recall major things like bio, when we wanted to have fingerprinting, and those are the safeguards introduced. The biometrics. We couldn't get anything off the ground because of Dr. Johnson to get the permission. Don't forget that again. Yes. So it transpired that this mechanism of budget agencies was really what my honorable, venerable friend, Mr. Ramsatan, described as control precursor. Now, let's look at the doctrine of separation of powers. The executive must be separate from the judiciary. You make Parliament a budget agency. That money for Parliament is in terms of releases, etc., is determined by the head of the budget agency for Parliament. Would anyone care to tell me who's the head of the budget agency for Parliament?
The things that we are seeking to amend today have been there from time immemorial. As if it was put by one against another, it has been there. We're now seeking to regularize things. But they've been there for a long time.
The distinguishing feature about independent institutions under the Constitution was that they could have directly gained their money as a charge on the consolidated fund. But with a budget agency, there was that removed the direct charge arrangement. Yes, it removed that lump sum arrangement, and therefore you kept control to the executive in terms of how the money. And so we are saying, Mr. Speaker, that the arrangement infringes the doctrine of separation of powers. Let's take it to the judiciary. How should the judiciary be guaranteed by a budget agency? But hitherto, expenditures were a direct charge on the consolidated fund. So it means that the head of the budget agencies for the Supreme Court, or if you want to call it the judiciary, determines what the judiciary gets. And that can't safeguard or guarantee independence. So we have to revert to those guiding founding principles which are informed of our Constitution ab initio. That's what we have to return to. And that's why we're here. And to me, there was really no basis to introduce the third schedule in the Constitution. Fortunately for us, it only needs a simple majority to get rid of it. That's all it needs. Under Article 164 is a simple majority. And the PPP recognizes that because they were always saying that we need to move a constitutional motion. But we started with the statute, the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. And this is simple because Section 82 says the minister may by order amend the schedule. But let the minister could amend the schedule. What could we do as the National Assembly? It would seem to me, for your right, it is even more so that we could also amend that schedule, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, this doesn't need any long dissertation. We are in support of this bill. One, to amend the schedule and delete what was traditionally and constitutionally independent entities under our Constitution. Delete them from the statute, the schedule in the statute. So that would ipso facto restore them to their positions. But further, we will use our majority and we will repeal the third schedule to the Constitution created by Article 222A, because to do that requires a simple majority and the mighty vote of one. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
I feel an overwhelming sense of deja vu, having already made a number of arguments on a previous occasion, that occasion being consideration of the motion to grant leave for this bill to come before the Son of the House. I will, Mr. Speaker, very briefly revisit just a few of those arguments and then made a few other observations. Let me say first of all, Mr. Speaker, that you made an extremely important intervention yourself from your chair in your attempt to introduce some balance and objectivity and perhaps even sanity in the presentations made by the opposition, when you reminded this House, Mr. Speaker, that the current arrangements as they relate to the financing of some of these entities have really been in place since the time immemorial. What it means, Mr. Speaker, is that the attempt by the opposition to conjure this imagined conspiracy reveals the real intent behind this bill. And that is to create somehow the image or mirage of some storm in a teacup, some conspiracy, some attempt, some conspiracy. In fact, one does not exist. Mr. Williams, the honourable member, Mr. Williams, the honourable member, and indeed Mr. Greenwich before him, sought to suggest that somehow the inclusion of these entities in the reflected some adverse intent, FMA, some adverse intent on the part of this Honourable House acting in 2003. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that if you examine the deliberations on the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act 2003, no such concerns were expressed on any side of the House. In fact, the bill attracted extremely positive comments from, amongst others, the lead spokesperson on economy and finance on that side of the House. The records, Mr. Speaker, reflect this. At the time, persons speaking on both sides of the House recognized the immeasurable merit of this Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, recognized the vast contribution that that act would make to modernizing the legislative architecture that govern the management of our public finances, and recognized, in fact, that this bill at the time, what is now the Principal Act, the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act, was in fact recognized, the House recognized, in fact, that this, read together with the constitutional amendments of 2001, read together with the procurement, and read together with the audit bill that was soon to become an act just a few months thereafter, constitute an extreme for management, accountability, and transparency of public finances. Mr. Speaker, these were not one-off isolated ventures in the parliament. There was a systematic, carefully crafted endeavor to modernize the architecture governing management of public finances. There were, in the first instance, significant amendments to the Constitution, the 2001 amendments, which, among other things, enhanced the independence of the Auditor General's office, the obligation of that office to report to this House through the Minister of Finance, and empowering that office to report directly to the National Assembly Speaker, by expanding the mandate of the Public Accounts Committee, including by giving it responsibility for exercising general oversight over the Audit Office, by establishing the standing sectoral committees, which would discharge important constitutional obligations as it relates to oversight of government operations, Economic Services Committee, Social Services Committee, Foreign Relations, and of course subsequently security would be added. Following the 2001 amendments, we returned to Parliament first with modern procurement legislation in 2003, a modern act for management of public finances, the